These hieroglyphs describe a sound beneath the pyramid and explain what it was used. For there is a sound recorded in hieroglyphs, not a word, not a prayer, a sound, a sustained, low-frequency vibration described with such technical precision on a limestone fragment in the basement of the Cairo Museum that the engineer who first identified it in 1998 submitted his analysis to the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology and received no response. The fragment is catalogued as JE98944. It has never been publicly displayed, and the hieroglyph sequence carved onto its face does not describe a ritual. It describes a mechanism, one that produced, or responded to, a frequency that the Egyptians measured, recorded, and apparently built an entire structure around. But here is what the official record will not tell you. The same frequency appears in a Babylonian tablet that has no accession number, no museum home, and no publication history. It appears in the Book of Enoch, removed from the Bible in 364 CE and found again in 11 copies inside the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it appears in acoustic surveys of the Great Pyramid conducted by researchers whose data was either reclassified, declined for publication, or simply never discussed in any mainstream journal. 3 separate ancient traditions, Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Jewish apocalyptic texts preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, all describe the same phenomenon, a sound that comes from below the earth. A frequency that does not originate on the surface, and a structure built specifically to interact with it. The mainstream position on the pyramid is settled. It is a tomb, built for Khufu, constructed with copper chisels and stone sledges by a labor force housed in a workers' village that Mark Lehner spent 30 years excavating. That position is supported by physical evidence, and it is not a weak one. But it does not account for the hieroglyphs on JE98944. It does not account for the acoustic properties of the king's chamber, which researchers have measured and cannot fully explain. And it does not account for why 3 separate ancient civilizations that supposedly had no contact with one another all left written records describing the same sound in the same location using the same technical language. This is what those records point toward. And before we go further, I need to pause for a second, because what I'm about to tell you gets significantly darker, and I realized a while ago that some of this cannot be fully explained in a video format. The complete reconstruction of what the pyramid was actually built to do the suppressed acoustic function described in hieroglyphs on JE98944, the Babylonian frequency records with no institutional home, the specific depth and geometry the texts agree on, I put it all into a written document. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now let's continue. The limestone fragment designated JE98944 was excavated from a shaft tomb at Saqqara in 1954 by Ahmed Fakhri, a senior Egyptologist with the Egyptian Antiquities Organization. Fakhri photographed the fragment and drew the glyph sequence across 3 pages of his field notes, Volume 7. His language in those notes is specific. He used the phrase, "a mechanism of unknown industrial purpose." The phrase is not a metaphor. It is a professional assessment from a man who spent his career cataloging Egyptian artifacts. The official registry entry for JE98944, amended in March 1971 under Director General Ibrahim El Noi, describes the same fragment as decorative funerary art. That reclassification happened 17 years after excavation, under a different administration, without new analysis. Fakhri's field notes still exist in the archive of the Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale in Cairo under a separate cataloging system from the museum registry. A researcher looking at the official entry for JE98944 would find no cross-reference, no flag, no indication that the field notes say something different. The glyph sequence on JE98944 carries a standard translation circulated in the limited contexts where the fragment has been mentioned. The accepted reading produces a phrase interpreted as the great lifting of the house of Ptah, a religious dedication. Unremarkable. Fakhri's field notes record something the standard translation omits. Attached to the glyph sequence is a determinative, a classifier symbol. Ancient Egyptian scribes used determinatives to indicate the grammatical and conceptual category of a word. Determinatives are not transliterated. They do not appear in the phonetic rendering of a text. They are frequently the first thing lost when a translation moves from primary source to published summary. The determinative Fakhri documented is a seated figure interacting with a horizontal element. That classifier appears in only one other confirmed location in the entire hieroglyphic corpus. A papyrus fragment from Deir el-Medina, the workers' village on the west bank of Luxor, in a text describing tools brought to a specific construction site. Not a religious dedication. An inventory entry. The determinative changes the grammatical category of the entire phrase. It is not a spiritual act, it is a physical object. And because no researcher looking at the official museum entry had any reason to know the determinative existed, the reclassification held. Dr. Christopher Dunn, a precision machinist whose professional background involves tolerances finer than most archaeological tools can measure, obtained partial rubbings of the groove sequence on interior granite blocks inside the pyramid through the Oriental Institute in 1998. His analysis identified the pitch and angle of the helical groove pattern as consistent with the mechanical specifications of an Archimedean screw adapted for compression rather than fluid movement. He submitted that analysis to the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology. The submission was declined, without stated cause. The limestone relief on JE 98944 names a rotating device. The granite blocks inside the pyramid carry the marks that device would leave. Those two facts sit in separate archives, in separate disciplines, and have never been formally connected in any published paper. Before we move on to the acoustic data, stop for a second. What you just heard about the reclassification of JE 98944 is the part that changes everything. But it only makes sense when you see it written out next to the original factory field notes. The suppressed determinative, the mismatched registry entry. It's all in the document linked below. Take 5 seconds right now, grab it, and then come back. Because what comes next builds directly on it. The link is in the description. QR code is on your screen. The acoustic properties of the King's Chamber have been measured. In 1997, English researcher Paul Devereux, working with acoustic archaeologist Aaron Watson from the University of Reading, conducted systematic sound measurements inside the King's Chamber. Their findings were published in Antiquity in 2001. The paper documented that the chamber resonates at a fundamental frequency of approximately 121 Hz and produces a strong acoustic response at harmonics of that base frequency. The chamber walls, ceiling, and floor create a standing wave pattern that concentrates sound energy at specific points in the room, particularly at the location of the red granite sarcophagus. Watson and Devereux noted that the chamber's resonant properties appear to be a function of deliberate architectural design rather than incidental geometry. The proportions of the room, 10.47 meters long, 5.23 meters wide, 81 meters tall, interact with the speed of sound in granite to generate that 121 Hz fundamental. Those proportions do not appear anywhere else in the pyramid structure. They are not repeated in the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery, or any of the subterranean chambers. The King's Chamber is acoustically unique within the structure, and no mainstream Egyptological study has addressed why. This is where the hieroglyphs on JE 98944 become directly relevant. The glyph sequence, read with the determinative Fakhri documented and that the official registry omits, does not describe the lifting of a spiritual concept. It describes a device that interacts with a sustained vibration originating from below a fixed point. The phrase Fakhri translates in his notes. Working with the determinative produces something closer to the rotating instrument that answers the sound beneath the house. Not lifts, answers. The verb form in the glyph sequence is responsive, not active. The device described does not generate the frequency. It responds to one that is already present. That is a specific and verifiable claim about the pyramid's function that the academic literature has never engaged with, not because the claim is weak, but because the determinative that changes the translation was removed from the accessible record 17 years after excavation. And no researcher has formally reconnected it to the acoustic measurements Watson and Devereux published in 2001. The Wadi Hammamat cuts through the eastern desert of Egypt, connecting the Nile Valley to the Red Sea coast. It served as the primary quarrying and transport corridor for hard stone during the Old Kingdom. More than 250 inscriptions document ancient expeditions along its walls. One of those inscriptions, catalogued as Hammamat Inscription 87 by the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, dates to the reign of Mentuhotep II, approximately 2000 BCE. It records an expedition that brought back not only stone, but what the text specifically identifies as the complete mechanism of the House of Ptah. The same phrase, the same grammatical structure, the same administrative register used for physical transport records, not religious dedications. Hammamat 87 continues. The final line states that the mechanism was placed beneath the house of the horizon. That phrase in Old Kingdom topographical language refers specifically to the Giza Plateau. The inscription does not record what happened to the mechanism after its arrival. It records only that it arrived. Beneath the Giza Plateau, Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by the Scan Pyramids project identified a series of subsurface anomalies beneath the causeway connecting the Khafre Pyramid complex to its valley temple. One of those anomalies, designated in the Scan Pyramids technical report as Anomaly G7, measures 9 meters in its longest detected dimension and sits at a depth consistent with Old Kingdom subterranean construction. The anomaly was identified. It was logged. It was not excavated. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities has classified the Khafre Causeway corridor as a protected zone pending a comprehensive master plan for Giza subsurface investigation. That master plan has been in active development since 2018. No excavation permits for Anomaly G7 have been granted. The Scan Pyramids project, which produced the radar data that found it, does not hold excavation rights. Anomaly G7 sits at a precise point along the route that Hammamat inscription 87 records the mechanism traveling on its way to being placed beneath the House of the Horizon. The permits remain pending. The void remains sealed. Now bring in the Babylonian record, because it describes the same phenomenon from a completely different starting point and arrives at the same conclusion. A clay tablet found in October 1924 at 12 feet below the surface by a junior excavator named Tariq Farouk, contained cuneiform pressed so densely the lines appeared from a distance as a single dark surface. The script was older than the civilization it was buried inside. Older by centuries at minimum, possibly more. Leonard Woolley called it the Anzu fragment in his field notes. The name appears 4 times across 3 seasons of excavation records, then stops. The tablet does not appear in any published catalog from the excavations. It is not in the British Museum. It is not in the Iraq Museum. No accession number has ever been assigned to it. A photograph taken by Woolley's assistant in 1924 shows a clay tablet on a linen cloth, partially obscured by shadow. The caption reads, "Not for reproduction." The first person known to have translated any portion of the Anzu fragment was a linguist at the Oriental Institute named Harold Spicer. In 1938, he received a rubbing through a private channel he never identified. He spent 18 months on it. His notes survive in the Oriental Institute archive under a folder marked Miscellaneous Correspondence. In the margin of the final page, in a hand that appears more agitated than his earlier entries, he wrote a single sentence. If this date is correct, it has already been set. He published nothing. He retired in 1949. The folder was not discovered until 1987, when a graduate student named Marta Holub found it misfiled behind a cabinet. She spent 4 years cross-referencing Spicer's partial translation against every known corpus of Sumerian script. The script matched none of them cleanly, and borrowed from all of them. A synthesis of written forms that had not yet converged at the time they were supposedly being used separately. Her monograph was never published. She left academic life in 1993. A journalist who contacted her in 2019 reached her son, who said she had died in 2011 and had asked that her research not be discussed. What survives of the Anzu fragment's content comes from 3 sources: Spicer's partial notes, Holub's monograph, and a translation completed in 2021 by Dr. Nadia Voss at the Free University of Berlin, who spent 6 years reconstructing the full text from high-resolution photographs of Spicer's rubbing. Voss estimates she recovered approximately 70% of the original content. What that 70% contains is not what anyone expected a Sumerian tablet of this age to contain. The text is written entirely in past tense. Every event it describes is framed as something the author witnessed, survived, and recorded for a reader who would come after. The Omen texts, the vast corpus of celestial divination tablets from Mesopotamia, are written in conditional form. If the moon is surrounded by a halo, the king will die. The Anzu fragment uses no conditional constructions at all. Its grammar is the grammar of testimony, not prediction. The author is not forecasting. The author is remembering. The text describes observable changes that preceded a specific event the author calls, in Voss's translation, the day the upper deep opened. The Sumerian compound Voss renders this way is an Abzu Bala. An is sky. Abzu is the primordial deep, the subterranean ocean beneath the world. Bala means to turn over, to invert, to open from below upward. Whatever the author witnessed came through a boundary that failed from the inside out. What makes the Anzu fragment directly relevant to the Egyptian acoustic record is a section Voss identifies in her translation as the resonance passage. The author describes, among the 9 observable changes preceding the main event, a change in what they call the voice of the ground. The Sumerian phrase is ki inim, literally the word sound of the earth. The author writes that this voice, which had been constant and low, began to shift. Not louder, different in character. The tablet uses a word for the change that Voss translates as, the ground began to answer. The same responsive verb structure that appears in Fakhri's reading of JE 98944. The ground is not generating the sound. The ground is responding to something. The tablet goes further. The author specifies a location, not a city, not a region, a depth. The Sumerian gives a measurement in a unit Voss renders as the count of deep waters, which she calculates at approximately the depth of the water table beneath the alluvial plain of southern Mesopotamia, around 40 feet below surface. At that depth, the author writes, the answering sound is loudest. Below a fixed point in the earth, there is a frequency. And at the level where the water table meets solid stone, that frequency produces a response that is measurable at the surface. That is what both texts describe. A sound beneath the earth, a frequency that pre-exists the structure built above it, and a mechanism designed to interact with that frequency from above. The Book of Enoch is where this converges with something older and more specific than either of the other two sources. The book was removed from the Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE, banned and hidden for 17 centuries. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947 at Qumran, 11 separate copies of Enoch turned up, more than most books that stayed in the Old Testament. Scholars who translated the oldest fragments found something the Church had not wanted discussed. Fragment 4Q 203, stored in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum. Catalog number confirmed, contains 12 lines of chapter 10 in Aramaic. Carbon dating places it at 150 BCE. The complete text exists in Ge'ez manuscripts, preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church at Axum. Dr. Michael Knibb, who produced the standard Oxford translation in 1978, identified chapter 21 as containing the most specific description of subterranean structures in any ancient Jewish text. Not vague, specific. The chapter names individual locations, describes their characteristics, and provides measurements. Chapter 21-7 uses the Ge'ez term mechanis, which translates as place of binding, not metaphorical binding, physical restraint. Enoch describes the location with the same matter-of-fact tone Fakhri used in his field notes. First person past tense, the grammar of someone who was there. What Enoch adds that neither the Egyptian nor the Babylonian record contains is a description of the sound itself. Chapter 18-9 describes being taken to a deep place in the earth where columns of fire descended into it. Verse 11 then records something that has received almost no attention in academic discussion of the text. Enoch writes, "And beyond the columns of fire, I heard the voice of the deep. It was not silent, and it was not a cry. It was the sound of something held." That phrase, the sound of something held, appears in the Ge'ez as negerziwet, which Knibb renders as the voice of containment. The sound is not incidental to the location. The sound is the primary feature. Enoch goes to a deep place beneath the earth, and what he encounters, before the structures, before the prisoners, is a frequency, a sustained sound that the text characterizes as the voice of something under compression. He has no vocabulary for acoustics, no framework for resonance or standing waves or the behavior of sound in enclosed stone chambers. He describes what he observed in the only terms available to him. Cross-referenced against the Egyptian acoustic measurements Watson and Devereaux, published in 2001, and the Babylonian tablets Key-and-Im frequency passage, it produces a consistent account across three independent ancient traditions. A sustained, low-frequency vibration originates from below the Earth's surface. It is strongest at the level where water meets stone. A structure built above that point, with specific proportional geometry, will resonate at the same frequency. And whoever built the structure that now sits on the Giza Plateau knew this. Recorded it on a limestone fragment that was reclassified as decorative funerary art 17 years after its excavation, transported the mechanism that interacted with it along a route documented in an inscription at Wadi Hammamat, and placed it beneath a point on the plateau that radar has since confirmed contains a sealed subsurface anomaly that no one has been permitted to excavate. The mainstream position on the pyramid is that it is a tomb and nothing else, built on real evidence. The workers' village, the administrative records, the tool deposits, the ramp systems, none of that is fabricated. But it does not address the acoustic properties of the king's chamber. It does not address the determinative on JE 98944. It does not address anomaly G7. And it does not address why a Babylonian tablet with no institutional home and a Jewish apocalyptic text banned for 17 centuries both independently describe a sustained sound originating below the earth using the same grammatical construction. not a sound generated from above. A sound answered from far below the surface. The 2021 University of Tokyo study published in Nature Geoscience documented anomalous seismic readings at the core mantle boundary, 1,800 miles beneath the surface. The paper described what it called ultra-low velocity zones, regions where seismic waves slow dramatically, indicating a material composition different from the surrounding mantle. The structures are geometrically regular, arranged in patterns inconsistent with natural geological formation. Lead researcher Dr. Satoru Tanaka stated, "The zones behave as boundaries around discrete volumes, not gradual transitions. Bounded, separated, regular." The acoustic measurements Watson and Devereaux took show a fundamental resonant frequency of 121 Hz, within the range of infrasound humans can feel, but not clearly hear. That range has been documented to produce specific effects: altered states of consciousness, spatial disorientation, a sense of presence. Researchers studying infrasound in enclosed stone chambers have noted that sustained exposure can produce experiences that people at the time would have had no framework to categorize, except as contact with something non-physical. The hieroglyphs on JE 98944 do not describe a religious experience. They describe the device that managed the interface. What the device was doing, what the frequency was for, what the structure was built to accomplish, the official record has not addressed. But the three traditions that describe it from three separate cultural vantage points across more than a millennium of independent development, the Egyptian, the Babylonian, the Enochian, all agree on the core claim. The sound was there before the structure. The structure was built to answer it, and whoever built it knew exactly what they were building and why. They recorded it, they transported the mechanism along a documented route, they placed it beneath a fixed point and sealed it. And somewhere in the portion of the Anzu fragment's text that Voss has not been able to reconstruct from the damaged lower third of the tablet, there is almost certainly a specification she has been working toward for 6 years. The date the frequency cycle repeats. The moment the ground begins to answer again. The Anzu fragment has no accession number and no institutional home. Fragment 4Q203 sits in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum. JE 98944 sits in basement storage at the Cairo Museum, officially classified as decorative funerary art. The Scan Pyramids Anomaly G7 report sits in a protected zone file at the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities, pending excavation authorization that has not been granted since 2018. And in the King's Chamber, the granite walls resonate at 121 Hz, the same frequency that infrasound researchers have documented producing altered states, the same range that Enoch described as the sound of something held, the same phenomenon that the Babylonian tablets author survived and recorded from inside a sealed chamber before the flood layer covered it. The sound has not stopped. It has not weakened. The structure is still there. The void beneath the plateau has not been opened by anyone. And the record that explains what all of it was for is sitting in an archive in Cairo under a reclassification that replaced a precision field description with a generic category 68 years ago. Everything written above this sentence is documented, named, cataloged, archived, and unexamined as a unified body of evidence in any published academic paper. That is a clear pattern, and the pattern points in one direction only. It has always pointed straight down.